Distinguished panelists, dear colleagues, you have a bit bad luck because there is a Swiss and a Japanese here, so we are used to start very much in time. And so we would start. I hope that the rest of the audience will appear. I hope you enjoyed the very rich and nice buffet today and are still awake for the afternoon. I'm happy to open the high-level panel discussion on the Sendai Partnership 2015. My name is, as you can see here, Jakob Riener. I'm from the United Nations University. I'm leading the Institute for Environment and Human Security in Bonn, which is broadly occupied with environmental risk. The Sendai Partnership 2015 to 2025 was one of the very important outcomes, besides the Sendai framework, was one of the very important outcomes of the Sendai conference. It is a partnership on global promotion of understanding and reducing the landslide disaster risk. You have all the relevant documents, by the way, as part of the package you received today. So all documents we will talk about, you have them in writing. Still, we will go to introduce them. The Sendai Partnership has been signed by 17 signatories, and it is, by the way, it's maybe just a chance, but an interesting one, just the same number as the number of Sustainable Development Goals which have been introduced this morning, so this gives it an own sense of significance. The global forum of UNISDR in Cancun, from which many of us are just returning, has shown again, besides many other things, the sense of urgency of research that has to be done, among others also in landslide research. There is a lot of gaps still opening, so just a week before actually have shown the necessity of this work. Now, the global partnership, the Sendai Partnership is 2 years old, and it is kind of the first opportunity we have to take stock about it and to see how to further strengthen the network in itself, but also to partners. And this will be the main part, the main intention of the first part of today's high-level panel, namely the panel itself. It's a very large panel, but I think we have tried to organize it well so that we can finish in time. We would, however, then come to a major outcome of this conference, a major intended outcome of this conference, namely the Ljubljana Declaration on landslide disaster risk reduction, which will be introduced to you. You have it in writing, but my colleague, not seeing where he is, but you will see him. Mr. Badawi Ruban he's over there, yes. So he will introduce it for you shortly. And the idea is that we adopt this declaration tomorrow at the round table. It will not be a negotiated document, actually, where everyone has to agree on every word. It is a relatively general, but still a very concise declaration of intention. And you will have the opportunity to make comments, actually, to my colleague in the next 24 hours, so that we can take them into account. In this sense, it is still a draft. There is a third very important part, and this is what we call the Kyoto 2020 commitment of the World Landslide Community. The next World Landslide Forum, the 5th one, is going to take place in Kyoto. And it is a special one. While the first 4 ones probably can be characterized as true research conferences, The 2020 will be halfway along the Sendai partnership, so between 2015 and 2025. And this will be one of the important opportunities to take stock, actually, about where we have come, still have 5 years for corrective measures, for additional measures. So this will be both a research conference and actually a kind of, as I said, as a stock taking. So today we will go through these 3 steps, and I would not like to use more time for my introduction. Yes, I'm just made aware by my colleague that there is a video message on the program. As far as I know, this video message is not going to take place. Am I correct? The video message by Mr. Glasser is not, at least not yet here, actually. So yeah, so we can't make it at the moment, but hopefully it will come later in the forum. So this is a pity, but it gives us a bit more time for the panel. Now, I would like to introduce the moderator, Professor Kaoru Takara. I think very many of you don't need an introduction of Professor Takara. He has a distinguished career. He's a professor at the Disaster Prevention Research Institute of the University of Kyoto and the Dean of the Graduate School for Advanced Integrated Studies on Human Survivability. Kaoru is also the treasurer of the International Consortium of Landslides and the president of the Japanese Society for Natural Disaster Science. Having said that, I would like to give the floor to you to introduce the panelists and go through the panel discussion.
Thank you, Jakob. Good afternoon. My name is Takara from Kyoto University and also treasurer of ICL, as already introduced. So may I call upon 17 panelists to the stage in accordance with the list of the screen here. So I hope each speaker has already raised questions 1 and 2. So I'd like to invite all the panelists to the stage in order to the Okay. So, Mr. Chin-Li Han, Andre Schrin, and Alasdair Hainsworth, Irasema Alcantara, Genling Kwok, Salvano Briceno, Roland Oberhansel, and Arik Ismail Zadeh, Satoru Nishikawa, Paola Pagiara, Badawi Ruban, Miros Bijak, and Rudy Fadmanto, Oswaib Ruasa, and Luca Dumichel. So I think a couple of people are missing. Anyway, they will arrive very soon. So. As a moderator, I'd like to ask all the panelists to answer your question within 3 minutes sharp. Okay? I understand you are very talkative persons, but I hope I limit your time within 3 minutes. So please keep the time. And first round question. Question 1, we invite 6 panelists to speak, and after that we have some discussion time. Then we'll move to question 2 later on. Okay. So Chun-Li, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Takara, for giving me as the first one to respond to the questions that how we can generally advance the implementation of ISDR-ICL Sendai partnership. I hope that colleagues has read before the panel again the Sendai the partnership document, and this morning I referred to the 6 important priority actions that we have agreed in Sendai to take forward together. Now, all these are activities very important. I'm sure that colleagues have a different views how this priority tasks, 6 of them, that can be put forward. To me, I think if we look at the Sendai framework now 2 years after, I think the first thing I believe will be important is to see how on the national level that there's a stronger sense of the ownership and also the need to take actions along the Sendai partnership. Because for the time being, I think Sendai partnership is more remain in the communities, research community of scientists, and I think their connections with the national authorities, the ministries, or the agencies in charge of the disaster risk reduction are not necessarily that strong. I think the national bond, national connections that of the Sendai partnership is very, very important because after all, that the Sendai partnership is contribute to the Sendai framework for until 2030. This, I believe that we need to think a little bit further and how to do that. The second part is, I think, in one of the actions, Action 5, actually is about open communication with society, motivate society for knowledge transfer, sharing experience, and so on. I'm not so sure that for the community working in the landslide, we are already doing a great job in communication. To me, if you look at the ICL website, look at your search on the internet and so on, I think the materials we have, information available, are more packaged for the expert, for those who are truly interested in the subject. I think there's a lack of bridging materials, lack of a kind of products that can build connections with the civil societies, with ordinary people, with people who are not from the scientific background, to know the importance of the agenda. So this, I think, is the second part. The third point, which I think I believe is important. We have a Sendai ICL have already very good scientific publications, a very, very good, solid one. But we need to see that such a good products can be properly packaged in a way that become the service products that for the member state. I just feel that we may have a need to further packaging it. Thank you, Chair. That's the 3 points I want to make.
Thank you very much. So next, Mr. Gshrim, please.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm here representing the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO. And as a development organization, I would like to highlight the very clear and specific angle for us in relation to landslides and other more broadly defined hazards, in a sense that it's, and that is something that people who were in Cancun last week, and my colleagues were there, they also reported, conveyed to me that there was a strong sense and reaffirmation of the strong and clear vision that disaster risk reduction, disaster risk management is a developmental issue. It's not just, or it's no longer just a humanitarian aid issue, it's a developmental issue. And also that there is a strong affirmation that this disaster risk reduction has to really be, the delivery mechanisms for it shall not be through some specific silos, DRR silo or whatever silo, but through sectoral policies, sectoral approaches. So for us, FAO as an agency that whose mandate is to promote sustainability and resilience of agricultural sectors, agriculture, fisheries, forestry, land use, soils. That is exactly the delivery mechanism through which we have always intended, and we are now proceeding with delivering those disaster risk reduction measures. In fact, one other soundbite that I received from my colleagues who were last week in Cancun, and which I liked very much, is that the momentum now is to move from disaster management to risk management, or to be even more precise, to risk-informed development. And so this is really key for us, and some recent assessment that FAO has done globally has shown that about 23% or so of all impacts of natural hazards and disasters are being absorbed by the agriculture sector. So we have a major stake in addressing those issues, and also importantly, the solutions to mitigating these risks, those that can be offered by the agriculture sectors, are also, many of them are very cost effective comparative to a number of other measures, engineering or whatever. So we can talk about slope, so all these technical measures, if they are applied through the mainstream agricultural forestry policies, can be very effective in mitigating those risks. And finally, I wanted to, another very important aspect which really drives the underlying economics of the disasters. And I wanted to show you, this is one of my favorite books, it's already old, about 7 years old. It was jointly produced by the United Nations and the World Bank. Its title is very telling: Natural Hazards, Unnatural Disasters. So hazards, by definition, are part of nature, but what makes them disasters is how we humans, how we, the society, are either standing in the way or behaving wrongly and exacerbating the impacts of those hazards. So, so my final point is to make to adjust for this. The very important pillar of any risk management should be the various economic tools, and we have now already there is a publication going to be issued any day now on the returns on investments to risk mitigation measures, and insurance and risk transfer tools are really key and key pillars of the comprehensive risk management strategy. And finally, of course, the consistent and steady supply of data and information, including through remote sensing and other tools, is a major foundation of any planning for disaster risk management. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So next, Mr. Hanjoas, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. Typical for WMO, we always give you value for money, and I'm going to sort of touch a little bit on the second question as well as the first question in my response to enhancing relationships. And advancing the implementation of the ISDR ICL Sendai partnerships, and I'm going to do that by talking about the development of the International Network of Multi-Hazard Early Warning Systems. This is a group that was, or a network that was established during the Sendai Agreement. Certainly, it was spoken about during the Sendai Agreement. It actually came to fruition during 2016, and was responsible, in fact, for the for running the conference on multi-hazard early warning systems at the beginning of the global platform last week. And so the fundamentals behind it will resonate with the landslide community, because it was responding to calls by the states in the Sendai framework in order to promote synergies and partnerships between and among stakeholders and those directly involved in multi-hazard early warning systems at national, regional, and international level. So it's across the board, and it is multi-disciplinary and multi-hazard. It's not simply looking at only meteorological hazards or only geophysical hazards. It's across the board. It's also there to identify effective strategies and actions to promote and strengthen multi-hazard early warning systems in support of the implementation of the Sendai framework and other international agreements. It's also there to facilitate sharing of good practice and making available to governments and key stakeholders expertise and policy relevant guidance to enhance and sustain multi-hazard early warning systems. And we did that during the conference last week by establishing a poster session, and there were several posters on landslides there, and we were very proud indeed to be able to put those up, and those will be a part of the conference outcomes. The network's also there to provide a sound conceptual and scientific understanding of multi-hazard early warning systems and advocate the usefulness of a multi-hazard and systems approach to early warnings in regional and international platforms and processes. It's also our intention and aim to assess the progress made by individual early warning systems for specific hazards or hazard clusters, the existing relationship within and between them, and the potential synergies facilitating their integration into an effective people-centred multi-hazard early warning system. And I can't emphasise the people-centred enough. And finally, identifying new areas of and promote further scientific research on technical development of early warning systems for single hazards, while advocating for their integration into multi-hazards, as well as the application of the latest scientific and technical advances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hainsworth. So next, Madame Irasema.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator and Mr. Chair. First of all, apologies from Professor Gordon McBean, President of the International Council for Science. He was not able to come over here, and that's why I'm here on his behalf. Landslides are mainly perceived by society as natural hazards, and in some cases they are. But most of the cases, they are socio-natural hazards. So it is important to understand the social construction of disaster risk. And in terms of landslides, that is related very much to the management of the territories that we do. Land use planning, integration of development are two of the major issues that are related to landslide hazards. From the perspective of ICSU, it is important to move into integrated research so that we can have a transdisciplinary approach and to have the vision of all the stakeholders involved in the DRR. If we want to understand landslide disaster risk, we need not only to look at the scientific part of the hazard, we need to understand societies, we also need to understand businessmen and all the stakeholders of society. So the idea would be really to move into the co-production of knowledge. To do so, it would be important to take advantage of the strengths of international consortium of landslides. As all of you know, in addition to these world forums, we have regional and thematic networks that are directed to specific problems. However, I foresee that we can take part of those networks and make, I don't know if one or several networks, knowledge action networks for landslide disaster risk, so that we can reach beyond the scientific community and link to policy making. One of the questions I always have in mind, but I haven't given time to solve it, and I think we need the support of all the community, is the fact that we do not know how many people in the world are at risk of landslides. If we look at the papers, we really don't find a figure. The figure has not been produced yet. And that is because landslides are very complex hazards, but we need to look at the root causes of landslides. We need to look at the disaster risk drivers that give rise to landslide disasters, but also we need to pay attention to communicating science. I think we haven't learned, we do not know how to communicate science. We need to learn how to do it, and it would be very difficult just to do it in our generation. I think we need to from the very bottom, and that leads to the need of having education on disaster risk reduction. And we know that, for example, the impact of disasters is greater for earthquakes, floods, and even volcanic eruptions or other kind of volcanic activity. However, I am very sure that in the years to come, the impact of landslides is going to be increasing so much that it will be higher than the other hazards, and that is because we are not using the territory in the best possible way, and we are not linking the work we do with development and other activities. So the immediate message would be to do integrated science from a transdisciplinary perspective and to deal with risk communication and preparedness. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam. So, Mr. Nguyen, please.
First of all, I would like to say apologize for the absence of my boss, the Deputy Minister Nguyen Linh Ngọc, because of sudden work at the military, so he cannot come even he really want to come to that forum. And I am the Chief of National Project on landslide reduction, landslide hazard reduction and risk assessment of Vietnam. So for the first questions, in my opinion, the first point is about the government policy. This is very important for Vietnam. For example, it desert really big problem for many years, but recently, when the government really concentrate on that hazards, because its effect to the local people is damage to the economy development in the very poor area. So with the priority policy for developing the method to understand the landslide and also developing the method to reduce the damage of a landslide to people. So that's why that recently we already do a lot of work like landslide inventory, vulnerability hazard map assessment, and many other things. But we met many difficulties that we can find that if the Sendai partnership would help us, like we can sharing the expertise and for example, for many people talk about the early warning system. This very difficult to apply, not for our country, not only because of it's difficult, but also because of we lack of people who has experience on this, and also this because of the local government with very low education, very difficult to transfer to scientific knowledge to the local people, so they cannot control themselves or understand the methods to prevent that kind of hazards to people. So we need not only the policy, but also the help from international science to sharing and knowledge, and also we need in I have the same idea with some other here. When to look at the landslide, it cannot separate that only one separate disaster, because a landslide could be the consequence from a floods or maybe from some other construction activity. It's not own way natural hazards, but sometimes it's affected by another trigger factor. So we sometimes had many difficulty when we approach this multi-hazard. So more early warning system building for multi-hazards is also very difficult. That I think if we can develop it, this would be good for developing country. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So next, Mr. Sarbano Briceno, please.
Thank you. In response to the question on how we can advance the implementation of the Sendai Partnership, ICL Sendai Partnership, I'm sure ICL will contribute in many ways that we all know. It will expand its network, it will have more members, it will produce a huge number of publications in these 10 years, so we can expect a lot of products coming out from this years to come. However, if ICL wants to make an impact and respond to the request of the Sendai framework, we must bear in mind that the Sendai framework purpose, main goal, is to substantively reduce death and losses related with, caused by disasters that are related with hazards by the year 2030. So to make an impact and to be able to show that ICL has produced something that has contributed to reduce death and losses, my suggestion, my recommendation is to identify not more than 3 products that can be meaningful in changing behavior of governments, communities, and people with regards to landslides. And in that sense, I would like to propose 3 major products that are very much needed in the world and to which the scientific community of landslides can very much contribute. One is a set of policy guidelines to tell governments at all levels, governments at the national level, governments at the local levels, where they must invest to reduce vulnerabilities that are the real cause of the disasters. We know very well it's not the earthquake that kills people, it's the poorly built building, and we need to make people and governments aware of that and to develop policies. A second product that needs to be, or that could be developed, is a set of educational tools. I know that there is some project going on interactive tools, learning tools. But if there is a set of educational tools that can be disseminated widely to universities, to schools, at all levels as well, with the key messages, with the key components of what students need to learn about this, this would make another big impact. And thirdly, there is the need for a set of awareness-raising messages, very key, simple advocacy messages to raise public awareness that can also be distributed and disseminated widely through the media, because to reach the general public, it's only through the media that we can do it, both traditional and the new social media. And those 3 products, a set of policy guidelines, a set of educational materials, and a set of awareness-raising messages would be a major impact, or could be a major impact. That takes time, because it's not just formulating the messages, it's also disseminating them in many languages as possible, so it has to go by languages if they want to make an impact, and it has to go through the network of partners of ICL. You have the UNISDR, but you also have the World Bank, you have FAO, you have WMO, you have all the major agencies, you have a lot of networks that are working on this, so that would be my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So far we heard opinions from 6 panelists, and now we'd like to have a small discussion time. And if the audience participants have some inputs or opinions or questions to the panelists, please raise your hands. I can take some of your opinions or questions. So the question one was, how can we generally advance the implementation of the ISDR-ICL Sendai partnerships? Any questions, interventions? Yes, please. Madam Dwi Korita Karnawati from Indonesia. Is there a microphone for the audience? Okay, she's coming, I think. Okay, thank you very much for your cooperation.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm from Indonesia, and on behalf of Indonesian delegate, we have Indonesian delegate here. We are really appreciating all of the thoughts and concern that has been presented, and especially those highlights by Mr. Salvano Braiceno from Senior Advisor of ICL. Indeed, it is very important that we must have concrete action, no more than 3 products. And for that, I would like to support that idea, especially to those young generations, including students and also other young generation which may not have opportunity to go to study. And because of the young generation is Z generation, so please do also consider we utilizing the digital technology such as the crowd technology to disseminate the awareness for reducing the risk of landslide. And another point that I would like to suggest is also we need to enforce, to push private sectors to participate more actively. To be frankly, we have joined ICL since 2007, and almost difficult to meet the private sectors to be involved. So we know there are many researchers, many scientists here, so we would propose that each scientist, or at least among us, they promote international standard based on their own research in order to be approved as the international certification. Because in order to control the market, to push the private sector follow what we need to promote, especially through the like eco-labeling or industrial certification. And later on, our minister from National Disaster of Indonesia would also highlight that particular issue. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Madam Rita is a rector of Gajah Mada University in Indonesia, so she is very much interested in younger generation people and also cooperation with industries. So, Sarban, do you have some comment responses? Or okay. So the gentleman over there.
I am Sajid Ali, and I am from Pakistan. I am working in Himalayas and Karakoram on landslides, and I am a PhD student in Germany. Initially, one of the panel members has proposed that there is a need to implement the Sendai partnership on the government level and on the local government level. But when I talk about my country, about Pakistan, there is still, if I would try to find some policy regarding the disaster reduction in the disaster risk, about the landslides and like that, there is nothing, yeah. And I just want to ask, because there is ICL, IPL, and many organizations, UNISDR, if they are working with some governments of these developing and underdeveloped countries to formulate and implement that policy. And secondly, I have an observation. Whenever I visit different areas where there is a big disaster risk regarding the landslides, although there are many cautions or warnings from the local administration or government level to the people that there is a risk, there might be a big landslide, there is a risk of a big rock avalanche, but people are still living there. It's really difficult to make them understand. Even in Europe, on some sites, I have seen that it's a big risk to live there, to accommodate there, but the people are living. How can we make them understand these people? Because it's really difficult to make them understand to leave the home and entire thing where their forefathers and everyone is living. So I want to know how these organizations can ask the countries, developing and underdeveloping countries, to formulate and implement this Sendai partnership? And secondly, how can we convince and make aware these people in these areas?
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any responses? Sarbano, please.
Maybe quickly tell you something. Definitely, it's not a simple task. We know it very well. It's very complex, and it's going to take a long time. But even if it takes a long time, we have to start at some point. So we shouldn't look at what is difficult and what is not going to be able to change, but what we can change. There is already people that choose places to live without realizing that those are places at risk. So by making them aware of that risk, at least we are reducing their potential vulnerability because of their ignorance. So the important thing is to raise awareness. If people use it or not is another problem. But the role of the scientific community and the political leaders and authorities is to at least share the information, to share the knowledge so that people can use it if they want. Secondly, have you seen development of a poor human settlements developed next to a military caserne, a military facility? No. You'll never find a military facility in which poor settlements are allowed to develop next to them. Why? Because it's considered a priority. Therefore, there's nobody allowed to build around a military. So why doesn't natural risk become also a priority? And why should governments allow people to settle in risk areas? Because they're not giving it a priority. So it's a matter of prioritizing the issue and showing the authorities of the problem. It's not the people. The people will try to live wherever they find the place, so you cannot blame them. But you can blame the authorities and raise awareness with them, because it's very easy for the authorities around the world to blame it on nature or on God. You know, it's God's fault, it's a landslide, we cannot do anything, you know, it's nature. No, raising awareness about the local authorities' responsibility for not having the right building codes, for not having the right land use planning, for allowing all of this to develop, is the purpose of our international community knowledge. So it is possible, it's not easy.
Okay, thank you very much. So I can take one more question from that gentleman.
Ahmed Youssef from Egypt. I'm a geological engineering. I think I have 2 points here. The first one is there is a very big gap between the governments and the scientific community. This is the first one. The second one is between the scientific community and the local people. Because what I see is that the scientific community is like when they talk about problems and this, we talk in high level. We didn't reach the local people to even let them understand what is going on with the geological hazard or with the different type of nature hazard, nature problems and this. And I think we have to do something. First, do we have any role to the government, like to tell the government and to let them make like programs for people, even through the media, through the television, something like that. And the second thing, from the scientific community, especially from the internet and web page and this, and we have to put something for the local people, like, for example, simple movies or cartoon, just to tell them what is the type of problem. Because most of the papers and most of the research is completely like local people or normal people never understand it. Like I think we have to go to the level of these people to make them more aware about this type of problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any responses? Okay. So, yes, please.
Good morning, or good afternoon rather. I just want to go back to this. I agree with you about the gaps, but I just want to go back to the point of the question asked about the resettlement, that it's not just only complex and difficult, but we have to be very careful about creating new risk or accentuating existing risk if it's about moving people from one location to the other. And that means that the assessment and the scientific research needs to go beyond location-based assessment to process-based assessment. And that is the reference that Irasema made, that is the reference that Briseno has made, that it's the construction of risk that needs to be looked. Sometimes it's not just about moving from one location to the other, but dealing with the so many other drivers of the landslides, rather than just relocating those people. So we've gone beyond that, and we've generated knowledge that demonstrates that it's important to shift from location-based to process-based assessment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'd like to close the first half of the session. Mr. Chairman, do you have something, suggestions? Okay. So let's go to question number 2. How do we achieve a better commitment for the partners to the ISDR, ICL Center partnerships, a better networking and interaction to enhance cooperation among partners and to provide substantive services to developing countries? So may I invite Mr. Roland Oberhansel, please.
Well, it's a very complex question that deserves more than one simple answer.
Please.
Regarding the commitment of the partners, IUGS, the International Union of Geosciences, you are all member of it through your nations. And the aim of the union is actually, amongst many other things, to standardize, stratigraphy, rock names. And we just made this commitment a couple of years ago that finally risk, hazard, and this topic will not only be represented in IUGS by the affiliated organization ICL, so the consortium, but we installed a task group, and that opens a door to the further questions that when we need to have standardizations, IUGS now has an organization or a platform for people to work on such a standardization and to come up with the idea that was suggested that we need guidelines. The strengths amongst the partners, that's much more difficult. IUGS and IUGG, they have very good partnerships, and we have joint research programs that are self-propelling. The Lithosphere program, the International Continental Drilling program, and just as a negative example, another community with socioeconomists, with biologists and oceanographers invented the big, huge program Future Earth, where Earth sciences is completely underrepresented. So my suggestion would be that we have to start thinking about in being prepared to be ready when new programs like Future Earth or Horizon 2020 or some such are thought about, to be present, to have an entrance into these international programs that allow for international scientific cooperation on a solid base. And thirdly, I think that we as geoscientists will never be able to really tell the people what we know and what we are interested in. And I tried with my colleagues in Germany to go a different way. We are trying to educate the political advisors and the socio-economists after their fulfillment of a master in their proper degree, in teaching them the dimensions and the potential of geoscientific processes, not basic geology, but the dimension on what can happen, and they should transport these ideas, the long-term thinking, much longer than a political legislation, and the forces, the foreseeable but unpredictable, and the unforeseeable, unpredictable processes that we all know about, into their own scientific world. That's my suggestion for the consortium.
Thank you very much. So next, Mr. Arik, please.
I would like to stand up and to tell that I am from IUGG, which means the International Union of Geodesy and Geophysics, and I will speak tomorrow about what this union is. But it's my concern with this word commitment. Too much commitment we are, the pausing. And my union with associations works more than 150 years, just imagine. Yeah, and we are without any specific commitment except one. We are working to promote science and science for society. That's all, working very well. But if we are still thinking about some commitment of the community of landslide, could you please show the first slide? Could you please show the first slide? And I would like to suggest the point, which is no, my first slide.
Your slide.
Yes, I was thinking about this a very complicated question. I agree with my colleague that it is what is a commitment would be. I think it is one word, assessment, risk assessment would be absolutely proper to tell about commitment. Today we heard about these problems of the development of guidelines, or it is a development of settlement specifically and so on. But without proper and periodic assessment, we will never get what we would like to really communicate to society, communicate to governments. Because we need a proper scientifically driven, scientifically based assessments. I think that is one of the most important issues which the community dealing with landslides also should think about how to do it and which way. For example, establishing of the working group which will comprise of all partners and other bodies, and to creating the one group, it's very complicated becomes. When I spoke, you told me.
Mr. Arik, you already ordered.
Yes, I don't need now all these things. Yeah.
Okay.
And the point is that we can establish such a working group, working together, implementing the assessment every, for example, 3 or 5 years, at least within this period of time, 2000, we will have some product which we can tell, look, that is a program can help people to really, based on their work on the assessment of the best scientists and the policy makers working together, working in the co-designed and co-productive way, which Razema also mentioned. And that is, without it, I think we cannot do it. And how we can educate, I think many of us know through, again, this is education of transdisciplinary way, where we can teach our students how to do this properly, because risk assessment, it is a truly transdisciplinary issue. It is not one. Okay, could you just run? I already mentioned these things. I think it's the next one. Okay, well, that is exactly the one slide which I wanted very much to show. That is the most recently we published it. It is done by driven by Susan Cutter, who is a social and physical social geographer. And we are working mostly in disciplinary area. But what is quite important, to work into interdisciplinary area. Multidisciplinary is a wonderful area, but it is the area when we are just speaking to each other and then we go back at home and doing it our own. But interdisciplinary really brings a new product, and that is a risk assessment. It will bring a new product, as a product of the community of the natural and social scientists, engineers, and policymakers, and other stakeholders. And definitely, this message should be communicated to the governments to get truly issues that are relevant. And the last slide, and I am done. Please, last slide. Yes, risk assessment, especially involving scientists and other stakeholders from developing countries, from their country, for their countries, risk assessment specifically, will provide a substantial service to the countries in the need. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ari. Yep. So next, I'd like to invite Mr. Satoru Nishikawa, please.
Okay. My name is Satoru Nishikawa, and I'm a bit different from the others. I'm a bureaucrat. I have been working in the Japanese government, local government of Tokyo, and also have worked in the United Nations. Now, from a practitioner's view, let me propose something in relation to the first 3 points of the Sendai Partnership. Now, let's think, what happens after a big disaster? All the mass media and the politicians would be excited and shout, we should do something. What happens if we are successful in preventing or mitigating a landslide disaster? It's never going to be covered in the news media. Most of the politicians will never know about it. Now, that's the paradox of disaster risk reduction. Now, how can we change this? Now, if we are successful in preventing or mitigating a disaster, we're not paid attention. That's the problem. Now, thus, the preventive efforts are not duly acknowledged by the general public. That's the problem that we all face. Especially, I say this because landslides are mostly dependent on the local geography or geology, and it stays in the local area. It's never going to be covered in the national news media. Now, I have one proposal that you can try. This community can try. You landslide scientists or engineers, you always go to the field. Otherwise, you cannot do anything. That's the reality. When you go to the field, I'm sure you will meet the local government officials or the local mayors. Now, if there is a case that with your efforts, a landslide disaster is prevented or mitigated, and if there's success, if there's heavy rainfall, the physical destruction happens, but nobody was killed or no houses were lost because of proper measures, I would encourage you to jointly write a paper with the local mayor or the high-ranking local government official about this case as a case study, and encourage that to be published in the landslide journal. And of course, it's in English, but the local language version to be published either in the local newspaper or in the website of the local city government. Now, I'm sure it's difficult to have a good conversation with the local mayor or the local high-ranking government official, but you can tell them that you were able to protect the lives of your fellow citizens. Now you can publicize for you to win the next election. Now, that might be a good entry point for a good dialogue between the scientists, engineers, and the local politicians. Now, especially landslides, it's a matter of risk communication to the local people, local politicians. Now, we have to try real examples. And that is my proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nishikawa. So next person is Paola Pagliara from Italian Civil Protection Department.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate very much the previous intervention because you can see I'm from Italian Civil Protection, and so my point of view is a decision maker point of view, but is a technical point of view indeed, because Italian Civil Protection is a technical office of the Prime Minister officer. So we are a double position. So,
Madam, do you have slides? No?
No, I don't have slides.
Okay. Yesterday you
so
said you may. Okay, please.
Spend time. Okay. So I appreciated the intervention before because the inclusive approach, we think that is the best way to approach the disaster risk reduction. In Italy, national authority like us, we have an important role in coordinating the system, but town and city mayors play an essential role because they represent the link between policy and the citizens. And so it's very important to enhance this link. Thanks with this cooperation between national and local authorities, we have achieved major results, such an updating, I think, early warning system specific for geological risk and hydraulic and hydrological risk too, that is the target G of Sendai framework. And I think that another important level of cooperation between national and local level is to develop a disaster loss database, leading to the identification of the specific needs and priorities of a particular territory in order to ensure the adoption of the right measure. We have something like that for flood cut at the European level. The second point is spread the civil protection culture, educational issue, and so on. We have a special campaign in Italy that we call I Don't Take the Risk, and is a nice initiative because trained and informed volunteers, civil protection volunteers, provide the citizen on site with updated and complete information on the local risk, just the local risk, and teach them how to behave in case of disaster. So campaign, exercise, and so on. The third point that I want to stress today is the relationship between scientific community and decision maker. In Italy, we, from a lot of time, more than 20 years, we have a close cooperation with the scientific community. We have something like more than 10 universities and research centers, and we cooperation with them, Florence University, CNR, Italian CNR, and on the field, every day when we have a disaster, we call them to help us to manage this disaster. And is a very big responsibility for them, is a big help for us, but for this it's important to take a good border between scientific responsibility and decision maker. But I think that is a challenge, and this Sendai framework that we signed some years ago, I think that is a good opportunity for reducing the social and economical losses too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam. Okay. So, Mr. Operator, can you show us the member list of the panelists? So the slides of the panelists. So next, I'd like to invite Mr. Badawi Rubam, please.
Yes, Walter Ammann, the Chief Executive Officer of the Global Risk Forum Davos, could not make it for personal reasons. On the question of how can we do more in getting Sendai partnership be more oriented to action level or deliver more. If we look to the Sendai partnership, which after all, Sendai partnership is an emanation of the International Consortium of Landslide, of ICL. And so far, if we look to the last 16 years since the establishment of ICL, and over the last 2 years since the adoption of the Sendai partnership, I believe that both ICL and Sendai partnership are doing well. What can we ask more? When we say how can we have in Sendai partnership more commitment? How can we have more help to developing countries? How can we get more networking? These are legitimate questions indeed. But after all, ICL and Sendai partnership, they also have a limited mandate. They have limited resources. In essence, they are commitments. And a commitment is worth what it is worth. Irasema, in her talk at noontime, said, we cannot content ourselves with a commitment. We should have commitment translated into action, which is right. She's right. So how can Sendai partnership translate itself into action, because it is a commitment? I think it can do so by utilizing more its components. Its components are the partners. It should empower the partner, as Chun-Li Han advocated for. It should empower this partner. Italian civil defense, because they are partner, they should feel that they are empowered to use the IPL projects, to use the IPL national committees, to use the IPL school network, to use the IPL publication. They should feel that they are owner of this. And in doing so, they should feel also owner to go and help other countries which are in need of knowledge. Other countries in developing countries. Other countries who do not have ICL school networks. And to do so, we also need what Nishikawa-san said. We need individuals and champions who, disregarding the ICL and the Sendai partnership, they use the Sendai partnership as a platform to go to the field and to go and champion some message, to go to work village by village, town by town, in whatever resources they have. They cannot do 20 villages in 2 years. So I think, to conclude, Sendai partnership is doing well. It is only 2 years old. In the 3 next years before the Kyoto World Landslide Forum 5, I think it will do more. It will do more. So I feel with some optimism the future of this partnership.
Thank you, Mr. Rubam. So, okay. Yep. Next speaker is Miros Biziak. He already left? Okay. So he's missing. So we miss him. So next, Rudy Fadmanto, please. Indonesia National Agency for Disaster Management, please.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Rudy, and I representing government of Indonesia. Before I answer the question, let me inform you some information mengenai landslide in Indonesia. In the last decade, landslide is the most frequent natural disaster occurring in Indonesia, with more than 40 million people vulnerable to it. Indonesian government has been working hard to implement the landslide mitigation efforts to reduce the disaster risk. Considering the worldwide susceptibility, the landslide, and the resolution of the Third World Conference on Disaster Risk Reductions in Sendai, Japan 2015, it is a great honor for Indonesia to support this global platform, which will be mobilized to pursue prevention, to provide practical solution, education, communication, and public outreach to reduce landslide disaster risk. In the last decades, Indonesia has focused on delivering tangible and practical results directly related to the implementation of the goals and targets of the post-2015 framework for disaster risk reductions, some of which are promote the master plan for landslide disaster risk reduction to be attached in the National Development Plan 2015-2019. Establish the national standard for landslide hazard and risk mapping, community-based landslide early warning system, and designing landslide mitigation works. Promote an international standard of the guidelines for community-based landslide early warning system through ISO Technical Committee 292, Security and Resilience. Government support the World Center of Excellence for Landslide Disaster Risk Reduction of Gadjah Mada University. We promote a multi-hazard approach and focus on social and institutional vulnerability in order to implement the land use planning, building codes, risk assessment, early warning system, legal and policy development, and integrated research by involving relevant stakeholders at local, national, and global level. In this important forum, we would like to state that we agree and will work together on the initial fields of cooperation in research and capacity building, coupled with social and financial investment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So next, I'd like to invite Mr. Shoaib Ruasa, please.
Thank you very much. I represent the Integrated Research on Disaster Risk Reduction program, which is a scientific research program established and co-sponsored by the International Council for Science, International Social Science Council, and the UNISDR. We work on about 4 areas, one of which is to promote integrated research. The other is to characterize risk, disaster, and vulnerability, and also work with these complex decision-making processes, and then science for policy and policy for science. So I'm the chair of the scientific committee, but 2 other members of the scientific committee are here, both of whom are part of this panel, Salvano and Irasema. We therefore bring our experience to the ICL. And just like many of the panelists have raised the question of what commitment, we feel that the commitment is already there, but perhaps the difference is in the word better commitment. And that for us implies that individually amongst the partners of the Sendai Partnership, we are already committed. But how can we work together? So thank you very much. Well said, Badawi. Well said, Chun Li. Enabling and getting empowered at partnership level to deliver much more integrated scientific knowledge that will help in reducing loss and damage, but also reducing risk. Given that, I have two proposals in reference to the question. The first one is that looking and scanning through the ICL and the World Landslide Fora, which happen every 3 years. It sounds short, but it may also be long, a period to interact and share and learn from each other. So I would like to make a proposal that perhaps there's need to consider looking at or working around regional focused fora to the run-up to the global forum. And by regional, that leadership at regional level could be taken by the partners in the Sendai Partnership. And from IRDR, we have 13 international centers of excellence and very active national committees. I would only sing about the active national committees that are also big, all of them are active, is the Japan IRDR, China IRDR, NSED from Nepal. And then we also have 4 other directly ICOEs that are directly working on landslides. The regional one in Latin America, LARED, NSED again. We have also Japan activities around Sichuan and other areas, and IRDR China and IRDR Taipei. These are working directly with landslides. And there's a lot of knowledge, scientific knowledge that has been generated using integrated methods. So the slide that Alex showed of the moving from disciplinary to transdisciplinary, we have gone through that process as IRDR. So please, as a suggestion, can we take these fora to regional level, which would happen in between before the World Forum, and then the partners can take lead on those to exchange ideas, to exchange knowledge, to exchange methodologies, but also to learn from each other. Which brings me to the second part of the question that I'm sure that maybe not many people have on the panelists have answered, and that is better services to developing countries. We have to make a stop and ask, which better services? It might be that actually we will learn more from the developing countries. It has taken 3 cycles of the assessment report to learn that impacts of climate change are not geographic bounded, that the Annex 1 countries also need adaptation, and some parts of the Annex 1 countries now need more adaptation than the Annex 2 countries. So there is something to learn, and therefore I want to end my submission by saying that developing countries, there is a lot of expertise. You just need to work with us. And I challenge you to take the 2023 World Landslide Forum to a developing region. I'm not sure what that means now. It could be Japan, rather it could be Pakistan, it could be Iran, it could be in Africa, it could be in Latin America. Then you will learn that actually there's a lot of expertise and knowledge out there that you can learn from. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your suggestions. Actually, ICL has regional networks, so later Professor Sasa may respond to you. Okay, so finally, I'd like to call upon Mr. Luca De Michele, please.
De Michele, thank you.
Sorry.
Good afternoon. I'm the last one, therefore I ask you to stay on board for 3 more minutes. I will try to keep you awake. I, first of all, would like to say that to me this is a particularly difficult question to answer because I have very clear ideas about the answers. The point is that I'm pretty sure that each of you also have quite clear ideas, and that is what makes this coordination effort difficult, because this is a very, very heterogeneous community. We all come from different, it's the same discipline, but different backgrounds. We, for example, represent institutions. EuroGeoService is considered the world's strongest power in the field of geoscience. We represent 36 member countries, and we in fact act on behalf of the national governments. So we are legally mandated to operate in the subsurface space, and of course all geohazards. And the topics that we cover are many, so mineral resources, geoenergy, groundwaters, and of course geohazards. And landslides is only one part of all the geohazards spectrum. We have a specific dedicated sector for that, that is the Earth Observation and Geohazards Expert Groups. We compose of more than 80 specialists, really top-level European specialists operating in the field. They met jointly yesterday here, and they accompanied about 50 of them, me today, and during this conference, in fact, with the scope to network with you, and this is, to me, is enhancing cooperation. We do develop the official landslides map of Europe. Our team has currently a record of over 1 million records on the European landslides density map. One typical possibility for cooperation to me is in fact that we put this database at disposal to be matched with other databases, knowing that there are liability issues behind. So the scope, the exercise would be, for instance, to make, to fill out gaps that exist in Europe too, but that in the rest of the world, especially in developing countries, that is the topic of this panel, is particularly relevant. We do have a lot of experience. We operate currently a very large project in Africa covering the whole continent, where we do capacity building, not only in the field of geohazards, but also geohazards. And therefore, we can bring this expertise to the Sendai partnership, that in any case, we will sign the agreement tomorrow, but we support since many years through different levels. And we also operate in Latin America, in Asia, and so forth. So this is quite a practical example of what we can offer and bring to the table. But I would insist that signing an agreement like the Sendai partnership is very simple, but then does not bring anywhere if there are no concrete actions afterwards. And when concrete actions will be agreed, that means probably signing further agreements, MOUs or whatever, with a clear roadmap and actions, the roles of each partner, as I said at the very beginning, has to be defined. Has to be defined because each of us has different priorities and different interests and mandates, and therefore if we are able to clarify very clearly what everyone has to do, this would speed up the process. And finally, very last remark is that when dealing with developing countries, we have to be, and this is based on our experience, take into consideration that there is not one policy that is possible to apply everywhere, because the cultural differences are huge. They are huge in Europe, they are even bigger in the rest of the world, and especially when we work in Africa, in Latin America, and so forth, we realize that you need to have a different approach. That means also different strategies must be in place, including for landslides management.
Thank you very much. So now we heard opinions from 8 panelists. Is there any questions or responses? Yes, please, gentlemen here. So microphone, please. Thank you for your cooperation, Arik.
I would like to make a comment on what Mr. Nishikawa has said about contacting with local authorities, and also, in fact, this is what Irasema mentioned about taking actions and so on. And with the last word, we listen. The point is, I think there are two points of view. One is try to protect people and take remedial measures, just very specific remedial measures. This is also civil protection is involved in these type of issues. But there is another actor that I barely see in these type of debates, is the people, the decision makers on the use of the land. These ministries that they take care of the urban development or land use development that I rarely see in these type of debates. I see civil protection, but not these guys. So the most difficult part for hazard assessment and risk management is exposure. We have damages, we have casualties, and we have loss because people are exposed. Who decides whether a place can be developed or not is not civil protection, not scientists. are other type of ministries that they take these decisions. And there are two difficulties in this, because we have tried to collaborate with some country decision makers about this. One is, okay, who says that a land is threatened by a landslide? I, as a scientist, I can prepare hazard maps, but I'm not entitled to do this. We need, in a legal point of view, the management of the land is based on official maps. And the only group that is entitled to do this are geological surveys or a similar entity. What happens is, do we have landslide or hazard maps for the whole country at the appropriate scale? Not everywhere. And this makes that when you say, Mayor, okay, this part of the land is threatened by a landslide or whatever, rockfall or flood, say, well, who says this? I need an official hazard map that is acknowledged that is an official, and then even though we have sometimes urban laws that say you cannot build in endangered places, unless you have this type of map, you can do nothing. Any lawyer can go against the municipality and say, no, 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 nobody has said officially that this is a hazardous zone. And this is something that I miss in some debates, the people that take this type of decision of exposing all the rest of the population to the hazard.
Okay, thank you. So Nishikawa-san, please.
Okay, let me respond. Yeah, it's really difficult trying to convince the local authorities. It's true. Well, in my experience, 30 years ago, when we started to try to make hazard maps, most of the municipal mayors were against it because they say that if we expose the hazard, that would lower the land prices, and they were upset. But after 30 years of repeated negotiations with the local mayors, now in Japan, we have hazard maps everywhere. So it's difficult, but it's a matter of continuous trial for communications with the local authorities at the local level, in local languages. No matter how a nice paper is written in English, it doesn't influence the local government authorities. That's the reality. So as you say, it's so difficult, but unless we keep on trying, nothing will happen. And the most important point is how to champion real examples of success. In cases of some volcanic hazards, we do have successes because volcanic eruptions, they are so, I would say, attractive, I would say, in a word, to the mass media. And if it's a red flare of the volcanic eruption happens and nobody is killed, it makes the news. But how about the landslides? Because landslides are not so attractive to the mass media compared to volcanoes. That's the reality. But we have to try to keep on saying that there are methods to reduce or mitigate landslide disasters. And if we can highlight the real successes, that would lead, the accumulation of these small efforts would lead to change the mindset of the public. That's the only solution, I would say. And I would emphasize the importance of how to positively involve the local authorities. And my proposal is try to involve the local authority to co-author a paper with the scientist or the engineer regarding landslides. And if there's some success, and let's highlight it and praise the mayor or the high-ranking government official so that they can be, I will say, a model for other mayors or other local government officials. Because unless we keep on trying, nothing will happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Madam Paola, please.
Oh, in Italy we have the same experience. 10 years ago we don't have any exposure map for the same reason, because it's an economical matter. But now we have in all our country, and the key is the responsibility. If the mayor is responsible from the exposure, from the urban planning, and for civil protection too, he knows that if he does permission for to build in hazard area, he has responsible for the disaster in that area. And so this is the key. Mayor is responsible for the two matter. And so now it's going a better way to manage the risk in Italy.
Okay, thank you. So Irasema, please.
Very briefly, I would like to appreciate the comment by Jordi. I think he has somehow selected the keywords of this panel session, and that is the relation of disaster risk reduction that has to be done only at local level. And that is related to the question about the community participation. I think there is a lot of local knowledge that has to be related to the scientific knowledge to co-produce something meaningful to reduce disasters, but also the link between development and land use planning and the use of the territory. If we do not have the ways to interact with other stakeholders to manage the territory in a proper way, that's why we allow this land use to be at exposure areas and so on. And that also can be very much linked to one of the statements by Alec in terms of the need of periodic assessments. Because when we produce a map, a physical map of hazard, it is a static tool, and it changes because we use the geology or the information of the past, and this is transformed. And as I mentioned before, landslides are mostly socio-natural ones. So how do we put on the map that there is a terrace that was built and infrastructure, and how the safety factor was decreased because all these social activities? And that is a very big challenge we have when producing a hazard or landslide risk maps. And that's why we have to have a very dynamic maps that are not anymore, I mean, we can print them out, but we need to use GIS platforms or other kind of platforms really to have all the interacting factors playing a role in time as well, not only in space. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So any other questions? Okay, gentleman over there. Microphone is coming.
Thank you. This is Mr. Lim Min-Jiang from Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. I have two comments on how to help developing countries to cope with landslide hazards. Comment one on daily management of landslide risk. I would highly recommend the Chinese system, which is called self-reliant mass landslide risk management system. In Chinese, 轻车轻防. Probably some experts like Dr. Han probably understand that. So under that system, the understanding of landslide risk to the household level is well defined, and the relationship or communication of landslide risk between like houses, basically homes, local community, and the upper government also well defined. So I believe that kind of system can be applied to other parts of the world. Although it's sometimes difficult to understand the Chinese system. Last summer, I stayed quite some time in Chongqing. also in a small area, try to understand how such kind of self-reliant community landslide risk management system work. Anyway, that's comment one. Comment two, for landslide hazard caused by extreme event, like strong earthquake, extreme storms. For that part, I would really think the partnership, particularly the ICL partnership, can contribute greatly to the developing countries. For instance, during the winter earthquake 80 years ago, so over 20,000 people killed due to landslides, which is some of decades of landslide fatality. One event equal to like 20 years of the sum of 20 years of landslide fatalities. Similarly, so in 1999 Taiwan, or 2009 Taiwan, sorry, for colleague from Taiwan, Shaolin debris flow, right? So one event, 400 people, which is again equal to the sum of decade of landslide fatality. So from that point of view, developing countries probably lack kind of experiences to predict foreseeable or unforeseeable landslide hazards. And so way to cope with such kind of a hazard. So I believe not by engineering measures, but by, say, tightening land use, construction standards, and the promotion of non-engineering measures, like warning evacuation, something like that. So I believe the latter part, so how to cope with a landslide hazard caused by extreme events, is really something helps really needed from the partnership. That's all my comments.
Thank you. Any responses? Okay. So any other? Yes, please, gentleman over there. Please.
Yeah, I'm Viraj from Sri Lanka. It's a very good example. I just want to note that 2003 we had a very severe landslide situation and landslide and floods together, and we had 253 casualties at that time. Unfortunately, last week we had a similar event with the floods and landslide together, and having more than 180 lives at the moment in the present counting, and there are still 40 to 60 missing people. But one of the things we noticed that now the country having the good framework with the disaster management centers and good aligned institutions and other things. But unfortunately, what we notice is that the certain awareness what we are making to the community doesn't properly transfer within the community. So that is the biggest issue, and they wait for even the last event. So what we notice is if there is a good mechanisms to bring it up, the good awareness mechanisms, very large framework to the awareness mechanism to the community, what we have already formulated within the policymakers or the policy understanding. So that will greatly help for the developing country, because that is the major lacking part at the moment. Another thing, another major part is the policymakers sometimes doesn't take in seriousness of the even this Sendai partnership, that certain the development, that certain information really. If there is a good mechanisms to further enhancing that message to the policymakers, to the developing country officials really, so that will major supportive for further transferring that information to the community. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So any responses? No. Yes, Mr. Arik, please.
Thank you. I think I will try to answer to both questions. It's your question about the issues related to developing countries, especially to the hazards, which it's the concatenated with another types of events, particularly landslides. I remember this 2008 Sichuan earthquake, which generated a lot of problems, and one of them was the landslides. And that is a scientific community actually helped a lot to understand these processes. Why this earthquake, why in this specific place, why? That's why, again, this is a some type of the working together approach is very much important. I remember there is how the scientists from the community, our community, interacted with the administration. It's called, I think, CIA, yeah, it's Central Earthquake Administration in China, and they is cooperating in sense of the understanding of the processes, why it happened and why it's exactly at this place and so on happened these landslides after this big earthquake. Even to understanding the one of the processes, it's quite complicated. For example, it was not even believed that at this place in Sichuan, and Longmen-Shan fault, which can generate an earthquake with magnitude approximately 8, it was 7.9. But it was much less expected. That is the point. The assessment is needed at each specific locations, I mean in the locally, nationally, and regionally, to understand where the most important area the government to take this action. Not just telling that can happen and so on, but it's only the quite authoritative these assessments can help, in this case, communicating this knowledge scientific to the societies. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. So any other questions? Okay, the gentleman over there. So is there a microphone? Mr. Please.
Learned quite a lot which organizations are dealing with landslides, because I'm not so involved in this landslide society. But anyhow, I think the big gap is between science, research, and then politics, so land use management and how to bring hazard maps into legislation for the different countries. So for example, in Austria, we have hazard maps since 30 years, it's no problem. It's a kind of, in the Forest Act, it's not something else, because normally foresters are dealing with natural hazards in Austria. And it's working. Anyhow, and now there is a partnership between land use decision makers and persons who are responsible for natural hazards. And of course, there's another question, how to execute the act, at least. No? How to bring people out of endangered areas and so on, and how can you work with the legislation of hazard maps, and hazard maps meaning that in endangered areas, no people are allowed to build houses, or you have to have special building codes and so on. This is official, and so there's no way out of this. But in this, talking about hazard maps, normally we have some designs, right? So design floods, design as from Jordi, so rockfall, magnitude, frequency. And I would be interested, so when we are talking about landslides, what is our design? How do we come to a design landslide? So, because this is then built in the hazard map, and is it a 1,000, it's a 100 year, what can we tell the people then? From which event they are endangered, or if we are taking countermeasures, how can we mitigate these hazards?
Thank you. Any responses? No. Okay, Nishikawa-san, please.
Well, hazard maps are very useful tool to communicate what the risk is, but it's not enough. For example, now in most of the Japanese municipalities, the hazard maps are printed and distributed to all the households. But in reality, how much of the family members really see the hazard map? It's less than 10%. That's the reality. Now, but it's much better than zero. That's for sure. The next step is how to really draw the attention of the people. So you have to start with the local mayor or the local, I say, community leaders. At least if they have a chance to see the paper, no matter how you distribute it, physically distribute it, unless they are interested, nobody will pay attention. That's the next step. Now, so it's a matter of, I say, continuous efforts for communication. How to draw the attention of the people. And it's not easy because people have to pay attention to various things. Traffic safety, health, hygiene. What else? You have so many topics. But you can emphasize that it's a matter of life or death. And then the local mayor might have pay some attention. So that's the only way. So it's a matter of how the scientific or the technical knowledge can be communicated with relevant, I'll say, partners in local languages. And that's the most challenging point. And I would emphasize once again, if there is a success, try to record it, make a paper, and involve your counterpart in making this paper. If they are involved, they do have ownership. And if they do have ownership, they would be able to propagate the idea to their fellow mayors. So that's my proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'd like to close this discussion session very soon. Is there any, Rita, please be brief.
Yeah, very brief. Thank you. Shortly, we do really agree and support the last, actually all comments, especially the last comment. And I would like to share the experience in Indonesia. We have started to communicate with the local authority by approaching the local parliament. And the local parliament is always tend to control the local mayor or the local leader. So being the friend of local parliament create positive encouragement of the local mayor. And finally, we also managed to develop the dynamic map by crowd mapping, which involve the local community. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. So we heard many things from audience and also panelists. Are there any additions from the panelists? No? Yes. Very brief, please.
Your comment about crowd mapping just made me waking up again. And yes, if we have landslide endangered areas, why don't we have maps like the meteorology that is signalizing how the stability varies with the climate, with the weather, with interaction from buildings? This is all possible nowadays. We don't need to print the maps anymore. We can provide them on the internet, and we could be much better in giving recent information on maps.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so please be brief.
There's one danger about cloud mapping, because only the interested people would go to see it. If they don't care, they would never think of looking at the cloud mapping. Now, how to solve this gap? The challenge is we want to draw the attention of the people who are not interested. Now, if we can find some technique of using the latest IT technology to draw the attention of the people who are not interested, that would greatly solve the problem. So we have to have the assistance of the latest IT technicians or engineers, or I would say it's a matter of sociology to how to draw the attention of the people who are not interested. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have 20 minutes left, and now I'd like to thank all the panelists to go back to your seats. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Chairman, may I invite Badawi and Professor Sasa for their presentations? Okay. So, Mr. Badawi Ruban, you have something? Please present something.
If you can just ask me to introduce the Ljubljana.
Okay. So, Mr. Badawi Ruban will give us some information about Ljubljana Declaration.
Yes. So thank you, Mr. Chair. You are giving me the honor to introduce the proposed Ljubljana Declaration. The proposed Ljubljana Declaration is one of the proposed outcomes of this forum. In the package of papers that you have received yesterday, you have received one pack which concerned this high-level panel, and on page 1, 2, and 3 of this paper, which is also displayed here, you have a draft of the Ljubljana Declaration. This draft is composed of 15 paragraphs, from paragraph 1 to paragraph 15. Next page, please. Next page. And next page. So you have 15 paragraphs. In the first part of these paragraphs, we have a preambular part where it is proposed that the Assembly, that the Forum, express appreciation to the organizers of this forum, to the host country Slovenia, to all the also Slovenian national entities who participated, and I would like again to recognize our friend Matthias Mikos, who is present with us. So this paragraph is an acknowledgement and expression of gratitude to the hosts. Second, third, and fourth paragraph are intended to revisit the necessity of the landslide problem, how landslide phenomena are in a way correlated with possibly climate change and so on, how essentially the vulnerability to landslide is augmenting. The third part of the text would describe the background of the ICL and also the road to the adoption of the ICL-ISDR Sendai partnership, which took place in the Sendai conference in 2015. Maybe we can have the second page instead of the, yes, thank you. Then, so this paragraph describing the adoption of the Sendai partnership is paragraph 9. The paragraph 10 and 11, next please. No, next, yes, thank you. 10 and 11 would again emphasize the calls made in the Sendai partnership, calls for governments, call for the partners of the partnership, calls for the non-governmental organization to enhance their commitment to the partnership. And the last part of the Ljubljana Declaration is going to look forward. And looking forward is essentially emphasized by the perspective of the 5th World Landslide Forum. The 5th World Landslide Forum is proposed to take place in November 2020, and later on you will hear about it. And the Ljubljana Declaration, in its last part, draw the attention to this 5th World Landslide Forum, and it also draws the attention on